the technical advisor for ICI, Pat Johns, and he's going to be looking at some of the more common garden pests and diseases and telling us how to deal with them. Hello, Pat.
Hello, Geoff.
Now, you're the insecticide and fungicide king of the world, I understand. If last season is anything like this season is anything like last, I'm going to need you.
Oh,
well. I'm planting some roses here at the moment, and what I've done actually is to plant some bush roses in the centre parts here, and I've used just one variety on that.
Ah, yes. Well, this is going to give you a more striking appearance.
I think so, yeah. They all flower at the same time, all come at the same height, all the same colour, and you get that real mass of colour there.
Yeah.
But in the front, I'm putting some of these more bushy miniature roses in, and I'm planting these in threes of different colours so that we get the variation of colour throughout.
Yeah.
I think that should look quite nice. What worries me, of course, is that with roses, I, like everybody else, I know I'm going to be troubled with pests and diseases.
Afraid so.
What do you think is going to be the biggest problem here?
Well, I think the black spot, you know, Geoff, is going to be something of a problem because it's progressing all over the country now.
It's getting worse, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes, I'm afraid so. Well, I think we've got the Clean Air Act around us now, Geoff, and let's face it, when there was a bit of soot up in the atmosphere, then there was a bit of fungicide up there too, wasn't there?
Yes.
But you see, this is what happens. You've got these black spots on the leaf, and those are going to get very much larger than this as the season goes on, and eventually the leaf's going to go yellow and drop off before it should. And let's face it, the leaf is the food factory of the plant, isn't it? And if you haven't got any leaves there, then you've got nothing to feed the bloom, and so the bloom is going to be smaller, and your growth is going to be less, and so you've lost vigour in the plant.
OK, so as soon as I see those black spots, I should spray?
No, I would even say before that, Geoff, you need to get that spray on at this time of year, when, in fact, even just before, when the shoots are just beginning to develop, a little bit smaller than we saw on the roses just now, get the fungicide on, because then you've got the protective layer of fungicide on the leaf, and what you should be doing is using a systemic fungicide so that it gets inside the leaf as well.
And spray it even before we see the black spots?
Oh, yes, every time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, now, the other problem that I was blessed with last year was mildew on roses.
Yes, this is not a roses plant, as you can see, Geoff, but the Sintons are pretty much the same. They're these little white, fluffy spots that, like the black spot, eventually get very much larger, and the whole leaf is covered in time. The disease is feeding on the inside of the leaf, and you're losing vigour again. The leaf is smaller, and the flowers are going to be smaller too.
Can I use the same fungicide for mildew control that I use for black spot?
Well, it's better to select the one that you can use for both, because let's face it, it's cheaper, and it doesn't take so long, does it, to get the stuff on to control both?
A lot of time and trouble, yeah.
That's right.
Right, that's the main diseases sorted out, but on every plant that I have, and particularly on my roses, green fly is a tremendous problem.
Oh, yes, what a problem it is too. At this time of year, let's face it, if you've got a green fly in your plant first thing in the morning at breakfast time, you've got 5 there by supper time, haven't you?
That's true, yeah. And this little cabbage, look, has really got some problems, hasn't it? Look at those green fly crawling about on there already.
That's right. They're all sucking away at the sap, aren't they? And taking out the plant foods all the time.
Right, now, we can obviously spray that with a green fly insecticide, but what worries me, Pat, is this, that if I'm going to spray with an insecticide for green fly on all my plants, surely I'm going to kill all the beneficial insects, things like ladybirds, which after all are going to eat the green fly.
Well, not always, you see, because there is an insecticide that you can use. It'll only kill green fly. It won't harm ladybirds or lacewings or any of the other beneficial insects like bees. It took a long time to develop this one, about 8 years in fact.
Did it really?
Oh yes,
yeah.
Yes.
But of course with green fly being so widespread on all the plants in the garden, it's well worth using that sort of
every
thing,
single time. Oh yeah.
Now can I, if I want to spray against, say, green fly and black spot at the same time, can I mix an insecticide and a fungicide?
You can, Geoff, but always read the label and it'll tell you on there exactly which chemicals you can mix together. It's important to keep to one manufacturer's product to do this. Never mix different manufacturers' products in the same can. And it'll tell you exactly how to mix it on the label. It'll probably say mix a capful to the gallon.
Well, look, Pat, I want you to do this for me because I've got one point of confusion here. If it says use 1 capful per gallon, and I'm going to mix 2, do I use 2 capfuls in 1 gallon, or 2 capfuls in 2 gallons?
Yes. This is the problem that gets a lot of people. The thing to do, Geoff, is to mix exactly the same rate. You see, you shake the bottle, and then you mix out, you tip out your insecticide into the container, as it tells you on the bottle, to the ring on the top. Like that, pour that in, and then you take your insecticide and do exactly the same thing, a whole capful yet again, so that you've got the full strength of both chemicals in the can.
In the same gallon?
That's right,
yeah.
Yes. Don't do half measures. And then mix it up so that it's thoroughly mixed in your can, and then you can spray away.
Is it worthwhile adding a little bit extra insecticide just for luck?
No, never do that, Geoff. Do exactly what it tells you to on the label. Manufacturers gone to a lot of expense to get this right, and it just isn't worth putting more or less.
No. OK, well, these roses are never going to get any pest and diseases unless we get them planted, so let's get on with it, shall we?
Now, if I want a blaze of colour during the summer months, now is the time to make some preparations. And I thought it would be nice to have hardy annuals at this end bit of the ornamental border. A hardy annual, of course, is a flower that you can sow the seed now direct where it is going to bloom. In other words, there's no need to bother with artificial warmth in a greenhouse or anything else. Before sowing, though, there is one essential thing, and that is to make some sort of plan. So let's start with this end. Now here I'm going to need something fairly tall, which will go in sort of bordering the path there, and also coming round to more or less join up with the post on the end. So that's the backroom boy, if you like. Then in the centre here, also on something reasonably tall, so we could have a sweep here of a hardy annual that's going to make, let's say, about 3 feet in height. So there's 2 in. Now then, we want a titch of a fella in the front, don't we? Otherwise it's going to mask everything else. So here, I'm going to put in something which is going to edge the border without being more than possibly 3 inches, 4 inches tall. Now that leaves a space in between the big boys and the little fellas. So here I think I'm going to have the second row, one there, another one here, about 2 feet, you see, something of that height, and finally one to sweep around here. And the beauty of this, of course, you can do the whole of this job using just one implement, the rake. Now then, having got the areas mapped out, if you like, there's 2 ways of sowing the, if we regard these as counties, if you like, there's 2 ways of sowing them. First, we could sow them broadcast. That's just to scatter the seed over the whole area. The other way, the way I prefer, is to do it like this. Short rows with, let's say, 9 to 12 inches between the rows. And the reason for that is that in this piece, after we've sown the hardy annual, whatever it is, and I'll tell you in a minute, we are, of course, going to have the flower germinating, but also we're going to have the weeds coming up. And very often it's terribly difficult to tell the difference between the weed and the hardy annual. But if you have them, you see, coming up in straight lines like that, then it's easy to identify them. Right, now then, let's put the rake down there for a minute, and first of all, we've got, for the back row, Lavatera. And this is really, it is an astonishing annual. It's, not only is it extremely beautiful, but it has, you see, the amazing ability to grow from seed so thinly, like that, but it grows from seed into a plant about 4 feet tall. And looking at it come the summer, and we will be, I hope, you will see that it is fully, fully, almost a shrub in appearance. Quite amazing. Woody stems, and then you have these lovely pale pink flowers with a silver sheen on them. It really is a glorious, glorious annual. In front of that, I'm going to sow cornflower. I think that will contrast very nicely with the pink of the Lavatera. So let's do my little lines along here. You see the cornflower, tall double mixed. That's going to be shades of blue, light and dark. It's also going to produce some pinkish flowers. Attractive seed has the cornflower. Now don't worry if during the course of germination that there are gaps. Don't worry about it one little bit, because we can be thinning. We'll have to thin probably because everybody sows too thickly. And the thinnings can be used as transplants. Now then, let's just cover those in. And don't forget, whenever you're sowing hardy annuals, sow thinly. Because the deeper you sow, the colder the soil is, and the more difficult germination will be. And with a soil like this, which tends to be on the heavy side, there is no need to firm harder than that. Doing it again round this side, making sure that they're completely covered. But only just. Now what do we got left? Well, for the front row, let's have candy tuft. Now that's nice and low, 3 or 4 inches. Again, a multicolored hardy annual. All the colors of the rainbow. I almost said a few more besides. That would be stretching it a bit. But they are all there though. White, blues, pinks, reds and so on. So that'll make a nice edging. That leaves me with 3 counties which I haven't yet filled in. And for those I'm going to use, over on the left here, I shall sow scabious. That is also a mixture of giant hybrids, and the colors there normally are shades of blue. You get shades of red down to almost maroon. Very, very good cut flower. And of course the cornflower, which I sowed earlier, is also a very good cut flower. And smashing for buttonholes, by the way. In the center between them here, chrysanthemum tricolor, annual mixed. That is the annual chrysanthemum, not, of course, the perennial. And I think a very, very underrated annual. Very, very beautiful, stiff-stemmed, and multicolored as well as single-colored. Bicolors, you get all sorts of combinations of color in them. And finally, over on this side, yes, I think Dimorphotheca. Now, that is, I think, a very harsh name for something which goes by the common name of Star of the Veldt. A much nicer name, I think. Again, stiff-stemmed, very elegant plant. And the color, the flower color, pastel shades. We'll come back, I hope, sometime in the summer, and we'll see how well this has worked. It's going to be good. And if you want a carpet of color through the summer in your garden for a very small outlay, you can't beat the hardy annuals.
if you've got an unheated greenhouse and you live south of the Midlands, now's the time to be getting your tomatoes in there. If you live further north, it's prudent probably to wait a couple of weeks. I'm growing mine in growing bags, or you can use large pots, or if you haven't grown tomatoes in the greenhouse before, they can go straight in the soil. But it's also time to think about preparing the land for tomatoes outside too. And this is exactly what I'm doing here. Now, I am digging holes at 3-foot centres. I'm doing this because I want to try and save on my expensive and valuable manure. So I've dug these holes about 2 foot square, and then I've broken up the bottom to allow the roots to get right through there and to improve the drainage. Now, in the bottom of that hole goes a fairly generous layer of muck. That's fine, lovely drop of stuff, this full of worms. And I also like to stick a bit on the heap of soil as well, just so that it's worked into the top layers too. Now, that hole can be refilled. Now, obviously, when you refill it, having broken it all up and put the muck in, the soil is going to be quite a bit higher than it was before, and that's why we're doing it now, because this will give it a chance to settle before we plant the tomatoes in round about the first week in June. But when it settles, it won't be quite as obvious as this, so I like to get my cane in, ready for planting the tomatoes against beforehand, so I know exactly where to plant.
Well, one or two problems we should have to look out for here, Geoff, aren't there?
Tomatoes are full of problems, aren't they? And particularly in the greenhouse. Pat, one of the enormous troubles that I always have in the greenhouse every year with tomatoes is whitefly.
Most of us are inclined to, Geoff, aren't we? These little chaps that come in and they lay their eggs, and we've got to get an insecticide on. One that's based on permethrin is probably as good as any, very quickly, and then about every 10 days through the season.
Because regular spraying really is the answer.
That's the answer, really, yes.
Not quite such a problem on outside tomatoes, but I do have troubles with blight.
Well, blight attacks potatoes too. It's the same one. It causes these brown, black marks on the leaf, and again, it's a case of getting your spray on early enough, and then if it's a wet season, to do it regularly.
Yeah, well, what would that spray be based on?
Well, there are one or two fungicides that are very useful. One's based on Thiram, and the other one is based on Zyno.
Fine. Now, alongside where I'm planting these tomatoes, I'm also going to prepare a patch in very much the same way for chrysanthemums. The difference is that I'm going to do a complete strip rather than holes, because the chrysanthemums are going to spread their roots out quite a bit. Now, there's one disease which is really troubling both commercial growers and amateur growers at the moment, and that's white rust. What do we do about that?
Well, look for the symptoms, Geoff. If you see little white blisters on the underside of the leaf and perhaps a yellow spot or two on top, then the thing to do is to get in touch with your local Ministry of Agriculture office. Somebody come along and have a look. It's a very important disease, and it needs to be diagnosed properly.
Right, so that's one we ought to leave the experts to worry about.
Yes,
isn't it?
definitely,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
The other one that you may come up against is the leaf miner. This has been a naughty one in the last few years. It's the little midge that lays an egg on the leaf or just below the skin, and you'll see here all these mines that are caused by the little maggot. Now, when you spray for this one, you'll need an insecticide to spray on the leaf. Be sure to spray the ground below as well, because sometimes they drop off onto the soil, you see, and if you spray the plant and the ground below it, then you stand a very good chance of controlling it.
What insecticide would you use?
Well, you'll need one here that gets inside the leaf, one based on methyl. It is best there.
Well, that's certainly something that I want to avoid in my chrysanthemums. It looks ugly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does indeed, yes.
If you remember a few weeks back, I planted some garlic cloves in paper pots to get them started, and they've done very, very well. In fact, nice bit of top growth, as you can see, a good 6 inches, and underneath the roots are coming out nicely. The time they were in, and they will make some very, very welcome garlic for the winter months. And talking of the winter months, It's very, very easy, isn't it, to forget about the winter when we're starting summer and when we've been sowing carrots and parsnips and things for summer use. But now is the time also to think about the winter kitchen and to be sowing some brassicas for using in the winter. And I'm thinking in particular of winter cauliflower, of Brussels sprouts, purple sprouting broccoli is another one. Now's the time to sow the seed for transplanting later on. So all you need to do is take out a very, very shallow drill, and I mean very shallow, 1/4 of an inch deep, no more, because the nearer the seed is to the surface, the nearer it is to the sun and to warmth. Right, the variety I've got is cauliflower winter, which is self-protecting, and so thinly, don't forget. There's no need to be thick about it. Nice and thin. That's about right, I think.
You won't forget to take precautions against fruit fly clay, will you?
No, I thought you'd turn up somewhere or other, Pat. And you just happen to have this with you, didn't you?
That's right.
Well, no, I would have put something on because I don't think there's a garden in Britain can grow brassicas without using a soil pesticide such as diazinon, is there?
Well, that's very true.
Yeah, just a question of back over, foot on to firm it, a label in, say what it is, and of course I'll be sowing other things. Pat, what is your philosophy as the expert on diseases and pests and so on? Do you wait until you see the thing happening, or do you take precautions beforehand?
Prevention's always better than cure, Clay.
And that would be your advice?
Oh yes, every time, yeah. And I suspect when you come to transplant these seedlings later on, you'll take precautions against clubroot with some calomel.
We haven't got clubroot, we don't want clubroot. Good advice, and thank you, Pat. It's been a pleasure having you with us. Many, many thanks.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Clay.
Thank you.
As part of the week this week, I've chosen Stranvinia Redstart. Now, this is an entirely new cross between Stransvasia and Photinia, and it's inherited many of the good characteristics of both parents. It's evergreen, first of all, and in the spring, the new growths of this lovely